All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the panel about using data to land your data science job. So my name is Ken G. I'm the head of data science at a company called Scouts Consulting Group. I also am probably better known for my YouTube channel and my podcast, Ken's Nearest Neighbors, where I interview a lot of data scientists. I've interviewed both of the panelists here today, Jay Feng and Jeff Lee. So if you want their full entire life story, you definitely have to check out the podcast for that one. Today, we have a really interesting topic and two incredible panelists. I've seen from my own experience and from engaging with a lot of communities, the data scientists can be an incredibly technical and really great with both coding and statistics and any of the relevant skill sets. But when it comes to landing a job, they're not looking at the job process as scientific. So the two panelists that I brought in today, I think, can tell an incredible story about how to use data in a more sophisticated way, especially when it comes to approaching the job search and the job market. So the first guest I'd like to introduce is Jeff Lee. So Jeff is a good friend of mine, an excellent surfer. He also is a senior data scientist at Spotify, and he's worked as a data scientist at DoorDash as well. What makes Jeff so unique, and well, there are a lot of things that make him unique, but something that really stands out relevant to this panel discussion is that during essentially one of the toughest job markets in history at the beginning of the pandemic, he was able to secure 7 different job offers. And he also tracked his progress and his success rates for his data science jobs as an entry-level data scientist and as more of a mid-senior level data scientist. He also does this really cool thing called Month to Mastery, where each month he really dives into a topic area and tries to learn it outside of data science. So something he did, I believe he learned how to surf and really focus on that for a month. Spanish was another one. And I think that there were a couple other ones. I think he's really into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right now. And we'll have a little match, maybe a live stream coming up down the road.
The transition.
Exactly. Our other panelist is Jay Feng. Jay, another good friend of mine, also a good surfer. I'm the only real surfer of the group. And Jay is one of the co-founders of a company called Interview Query. And that company is very focused on helping data scientists prepare for technical interviews. So he has a really good ear to the ground around what's going on in the interview space, how you can help, how you can better prepare for those types of things. And I really think that his unique insight from that experience, he's obviously also been a data scientist, can help shape how anyone else might approach this career path, whether it's actually applying to jobs or whether it's succeeding through that interview process. So again, both of you, thank you so much for coming in and agreeing to do this panel with me. You were both my number one choices. So that made me really excited that you were willing to join me here. I should say I am hopefully also at least somewhat qualified to talk on this topic. I have made a course called How to Start a Career in Data Science, where I interviewed a lot of people. I've talked with, I've actually talked with a lot of hiring managers and went through that process of understanding the interview process as well. So between the three of us, you should have a reasonably good idea about how to leverage data effectively for this search. So my question to start out, let's start with Jeff, is that why do you think data science applicants are overlooking the scientific approach to entering the job market? Like, why aren't they as sophisticated using data in their normal job search as they are in literally every other problem that they're working on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think 2 things come to mind when I hear that question. I think the first one is actually just to be even told to use data science for a job search. And I think this is a lot of what this presentation is helping you all out with, just the idea of knowing that, hey, data science is a tool to be solving specific problems, and you can actually use data science to solve specific problems in your life, and specifically with job search. And you can actually see that with the job search. It's actually very similar to a lot of other actual business problems that we're working on. So I would say that the most transferable way of thinking about it is the data science job search is very similar to a conversion funnel. So if you're looking to sign up for a product, you ultimately will step through steps of a funnel. And I think the job search is exactly like that. So I think the first thing is it's even knowing that you can actually apply data science to your job search. was the first one. And I think the second one is actually, in my opinion, it might be more of an effort thing where it is a little bit more overhead to be just tracking all your interviews, tracking all the data, staying organized with just everything that's going on with your interviews. So I would probably say those two things, even just knowing about it and the extra overhead needed to apply data science to your job search.
I like that. I think I wouldn't say that a lot of data scientists tend to be lazy, but we're always seeking efficiency, and sometimes efficiency gets in the way of a really good solution. Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some aspect of just being too technical sometimes with the thought process to not really apply it to other areas. And so specifically, I think when I see data scientists, software engineers, even when they're trying to land their first job, they don't really think about the soft skills as much. And also that kind of translates maybe into around, how you approach a lot of this, let's say like the nuance in the job search, right? And so from what I've seen, I get a lot of cover letters, even when we have jobs, of people just kind of copy pasting stuff. There's not that kind of sales aspect. And like Jeff said, it's like a lot of that kind of being kind of like personalizing something, cold emailing and kind of reaching out and understanding like more about the person really does increase that like first activation conversion flow metric versus, if I have one templated cover letter and I say like, dear hiring manager, to whom it may concern, like I am very qualified for your role. That's going to basically 99% of the time, that's going to X out every single person who ever reads that, right? And so if you think about like, how do I get the most amount of people to read my resume, read my cover letter, and then go for even farther from that is like, how do I get the most amount of people who read my cover letter to actually reach out to get me into the interview process? You actually do want to do a lot of these things that aren't very scalable, that are more personalized, just to really increase that kind of conversion like funnel metric that Jeff was talking about in the previous point right there.
I really love kind of both of your takes there. I think that when we look at the data science process, there's a couple forces at play. So the first is that, like, frankly, the data science role is pretty vague. And so what you can expect and like the data you can collect around it is limited. And there is overhead around collecting data around this, like whether it's taking a lot of job applications and narrowing it down to figure out what skills are relevant, or whether it's even tracking your own success. That is a lift, right? There is a little bit of heavy effort on that front. And if you're just approaching it as someone wanting to get a job, the desire to send out so many applications and be quote unquote efficient in applying doesn't mean you're going to be efficient in actually landing that position. I really liked what you said, Jay, about the soft skills. To me, this is a perfect example of where soft skills fit into the data science role, right? It's where you're identifying the problem and you're asking the right questions of the problem. And, that to me is an oversight that a lot of us make, is that we don't necessarily see some of the very basic things in our life as data science problems. We're not asking the right questions of them. I mean, this is something I've done with fitness in the last year, is that, oh my goodness, like I can optimize my health using data, or I can improve my quality of outcomes or eat however I want doing those things. And I would kind of recommend for everyone to take out of this that like almost every problem can be a data science problem if you're asking the right questions of it and you're looking for the data or creating the data in the right spaces. I'm going to start, Jeff, with you again. I think this is going to be kind of a longer-winded question either way, but knowing what you know now, how would you approach landing your first data science job? How would you, what are some of the things that you would do when going through that process? If you were, let's say, fresh out of undergrad, or you're fresh out of a master's in data science program or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I can answer this in the context of actually using data science to solve this problem. So, as Ken said, over the years, since I joined the field, I tracked every single application, interview, how far I got, whether I converted to the next round or not. And my number one recommendation when you're just starting out is to actually use, I mean, I think everybody knows that referrals, get you the best return on investment. But I think that the second best return on investment in trying to get interviews is to send cold emails and finding hiring managers' emails and sending them a cold email. So just looking at my own data points, referrals, I think the first time around, it was around a 43% response rate. Cold emails got a 29% response rate, and direct applications got less than a 5% response rate. So even though you feel like just blasting out your resume to as many people as you can feels very productive, the ROI is actually a lot lower. So you can just send, like if you have a 29% response rate on cold emails, it's about 6x the ROI as it is sending a direct application. So my number one thing would be to focus more so on finding people's emails and sending them cold emails when you are applying. And then the second thing I would probably recommend is that you should generally use more of kind of a reinforcement learning or a multi-arm bandit approach when you are approaching your data science job search. So what I mean by that is initially, study wide breadth. So study experimentation, study modeling, study SQL, and study Python. Apply to a few jobs. You'll get some feedback on where you're not as good. And that will kind of lead you to where you need to be focusing your studying. So be very dynamic in your approach towards studying. And then, and I would say also keeping in mind the type of role that you're aiming for. So generally lean towards, like if you're applying for ML engineering, studying more machine learning, experimentation, studying more experimentation. But the overall point here is to be dynamic and flexible with your strategy, because it's going to change based off the feedback that you get.
That's awesome. So something that you pointed out was your conversion rates there.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, Jeremy Harris, over at Sharpest Minds, which is a data science mentorship company, they track the conversion rates for all of their mentees. They have a pretty good sample size, and your rates were actually fairly high, right? You said you were 5% just from cold, just like applying on LinkedIn or some of these places. I think the average is around a 2.5% response rate. So a little, less than 1 in 50, you're getting a response back. And to me, that's a really important number to know as a baseline, right? A lot of people get discouraged. They're saying, oh, I'm only getting a 3%, 5% callback rate. But what they don't realize is that's actually a pretty good rate, and they're better than the average in the market. And I think that a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of disappointment, a lot of discouragement comes from not evaluating those things against a baseline, which is a really important part of data science, right? If we're just throwing out a number and there's no line in the sand to compare it against, that's not a very good analysis, right? I mean, not that your analysis wasn't good. It was very good because you were measuring it against the different types of programs. But it's also really nice to have that general baseline. So, more for your mental health as well. Jay, I love that Jeff left it open to talk more about the actual interview and the like technical aspects of the interview process. Can you shed some light on how you would approach that portion of the interview? Or of course, if you have anything to add to what Jeff said there, by all means.
Yeah, I would say that this is a problem, we've thought about a lot here at Interview Query, especially running the website for technical data science preparation. And, I think Jeff kind of hit it on the head with the kind of like basically going across a wide breadth of different topics, kind of figuring out benchmarking your skill set. That's something that we think about. I think even before you do your first interview, it does help to practice a few problems on those, just to understand where you are between, some of your peers, or just understanding, I've seen this, there's this question from Facebook, it gets asked every interview. It's a SQL question. Can I solve this problem in 30 minutes? If I can't, then it's probably a signal that, you should practice a little bit more before you jump onto that interview as well. But yeah, going back to also, Ken, what you're talking about for finding your first data science job, I do think one thing that I'd like to add is, and something that Jeff has touched upon in the past, is how I think personally, if I were to go back and look for my first job again, I'd be doing a lot more research about the company itself and kind of putting in that briefcase method of understanding, like, the company's problems. Something that I haven't seen from many candidates is that they approach every job in a very formulaic way, right? Where they're being the ones being interviewed, they're answering the questions. They just have to come up with the right answer to those questions. I think anyone will tell you that an interview is more of a conversation that's kind of assessing fit. And, you know, while every company has their own kind of incentives in terms of hiring, a lot of the times I think any company will want someone who's like proactive and generally interested about the company and the problems that they're actually solving. And so if you have kind of like any experience in the space that you're in, so let's pretend that you're applying to LinkedIn or something, and you have any job experience in terms of like doing data science on like job postings or analyzing like, you know, different job titles. That's really interesting experience and something that like the hiring manager will actually want to know about. And I think even, you know, kind of zoning more onto that, I think most of the people now are applying to, you know, a lot of startups. Startups themselves need to hire people that are like highly motivated, highly interested in the business problems that they're actually solving, and really interested in like understanding how you can apply data to that judgment of how to solve those business problems. And so if you come in there with like some idea of what the current business is actually facing in terms of problems, you can probably get that from doing some research, some like in-depth analysis about like, you know, the business space that they're actually tackling, and then kind of reframe that around data science and what their data science challenges might be. I really think that, you know, that's very unique, doesn't actually get done a lot of the times from many candidates, and really gives you like a step ahead in the game. And so, you know, personally for myself, even if I were to go out into the job market again today, I think a lot of what the senior people kind of know from their prior job experience is that they want to find a company that's very, that fits with them. And then also they know that the company is expecting that the candidate has done a lot of research in terms of how well they prepared and like understood about the company's problems and have some solutions to kind of think about that as well.
Jay, that is awesome. I think you can even take that a step further. Something that I've seen and I might have experimented with as well is that, you know, rather than just applying to a bulk of companies, right, where you're going to be a really average candidate, narrowing the search and looking at it as an optimization problem of, okay, if I'm applying and I'm more qualified or I've catered my work and my resume to this specific role, I'm actually going to be giving myself a better chance because I'm a better candidate. And that marginal return on the time that you put in to preparing for those roles is really going to pay off. One way that I pursued this, and I it might be a bit extreme, like even for this conversation, but something I did a project a while ago where I scraped a lot of job postings from Glassdoor. Legal gray area. So Glassdoor, please don't come after me. But I analyzed what proportion of them had Python as a language, like what were the most relevant skills for a data scientist in the roles that I was interested in. Like I filtered them by industry or by like type of position, like machine learning engineer versus data scientist, whatever that might be. And I was able to create a little model for myself to say, hey, like these are the things that these companies are looking for in these types of roles. I want to make sure that I do projects related to those and that I've emphasized those skills and that those are the things that are going to be coming off. Obviously, I'm doing it on an individual company basis as well, but that helped me generalize just a little bit. Like I was legitimately able to do a pretty cool data science analysis. That project is on my YouTube channel, by the way. And to determine what would be best for myself there, right? Another thing that a lot of people overlook, and Jay, I know you use this a lot in your work, and I'd love for you to talk about this too, is A/B testing. I had like 3 different resumes I'd sent out, and it wasn't like a clean A/B test. I wouldn't send them to the same company, but I legitimately sat in an interview and I showed the interviewer 2 resumes, and I was like, "Which one do you prefer?" Right? One was like a more colorful, like sort of like quote unquote startup-y creative resume, and one was like a very business focused, like something I would send probably to more of like a Fortune 500 company. And it was at GE, and they're like, "Oh, I want this like very structured, formal one." But you know, to me, that's like we're getting data, right? If we're looking at this as data acquisition, as these types of things, I can't stress enough that like you can be creative, right? You're applying to a lot of roles, and like you think that the person that was interviewing me thought that was like a bad thing, that I was curious about which of my resumes was more effective for landing that specific role, or like Like that's what a data scientist should be doing on a day-to-day basis, is asking those types of questions. Jay, to that point, I would be interested into like some of the learnings that you found through owning your own company and like scoping the data science projects around this domain, whether it's A/B testing, whether it's like, hey, this is how often the interview questions at these big companies change. Like, are there any data points that you found from your specific work that you think would be relevant for this conversation at hand?
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting data point we found is that we looked at the people that were actually getting jobs and the people that weren't getting jobs, right? And so we have this survey, we send it out to everyone basically a few months after they sign up. We ask them, did you achieve your goal or not? And basically the people that we saw that achieved their goal had practiced like probably on average 20% more interview questions and looked at 20% more content than the people that didn't achieve their goal, right? And there's a little bit of like causation correlation there. But I think in general, even when we stripped away and normalized all the data there for the biases, we see that like, the more time you spend actively, practicing or preparing for the interview, obviously the more likely you're actually going to be, basically going to land and achieve your goal there. And, for us, we saw it, we're like, yay, they're like doing more interview query. They're like really, they're practicing. So our product is kind of showcasing that, they're doing better, but that's not really the case. It's more like our product is a signal for intent and effort in terms of how hard someone's willing to work to actually achieve their goals. And for us, we saw that as just kind of like, effort, grit, determination, is always going to win over, I think, any other kind of, a lot of kind of strategy, because at the end of the day, you will kind of like get towards that, I think, general goal that you want to achieve. On the second part, I say that, a lot of the analysis that we've done in terms of also seeing how, the best kind of successes and like what we can pick apart from the people that have been successful on the platform is that the feedback they give us is that it definitely is, not only just a grind, but also just about understanding like how to structure the way that you think about a problem, right? And so we give a lot of materials on like how you should think, how you should kind of frame the problem, how you should really optimize your like studying process, because as we all know, like there's an endless amount of data science resources out there. There's an endless amount of data science knowledge in the world. I think the very nature of AI and data science is that it's improving upon itself every day. And so it's not like we can, realistically figure out what there is for us to like kind of study if we try to study everything. And so when we're actually really trying to narrow down the scope of our studying, it's really important to understand and optimize for, as Jeff said before, like really honing in on like SQL problems if it's going to focus on SQL, or Ken with your like kind of Glassdoor scraper, like understanding what the question types are actually going to be asked is going to be really important there as well. Because it's really true that the questions that are asked in the interview are very much like the questions and the problems that they're going to face on a day-to-day basis, right? And so that's kind of like the game that you have to play, is because, you can't really come in with the expectation that if you only know like pandas and everyone works in SQL and they give you a SQL problem that you're going to like do well at this company, even if you were to not take the interview and just get the job, right? Like the interview is meant to just kind of give you a sense of what is actually happening at the company and what kind of problems they're actually trying to tackle right now. And so many times I'd say that like, preparing for the interview, it is a process, it is a grind, but at the same time, if you do it correctly, you kind of understand you're really like upskilling yourself to getting better at like becoming a better data scientist. And we've seen this across the board from people that are transitioning jobs, or even people internally at different FANG companies that want to move from one company to another. They do the interview prep and they realize that they're actually just creating structure for them to learn data science in a way that they couldn't really on their job when they have different kinds of responsibilities from, kind of expanding their skill set.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One thing I'll add to that is when I was studying for interviews, I actually used interview query, not to unintentionally plugging him, but the idea
the best chill.
Yeah, the idea here is that the best way to actually study for it is to do mostly practice problems. So generally, the best way to actually learn all the new material is not to read the textbook. It's actually to do practice problems on the textbook. It is actually scientifically proven to actually help you retain the knowledge a lot better. It requires you to be a lot more effortful with your studying, but you'll actually remember all the concepts and you'll remember the context in which a concept applies. So if I give you a vague business problem where you have to use a linear regression or a logistic regression, if you just memorize the formula, you wouldn't really know how to connect it to the business problem. But just doing a lot of case studies and practice problems, you'll know that, okay, for this business problem, I can actually use linear regression to solve this specific problem. So that's actually where a lot of, and that's why you just need to get a lot of reps in and get a lot of practice problems in. And then after like a while, you'll start to have pattern recognition. You'll start to see, oh yeah, I've seen this kind of question before. Don't know the answer, but I know how to tackle this question. So that's one thing I'll add to what Jay just said.
Yeah, and to add one last thing on top, actually, for Jeff, the top commenter on interview queries still is that if you actually go down and do and write down what your answers as well. I think this is actually really important because Jeff kind of talked about practicing the questions, but you have to go through the process of writing it down and actually committing it to paper, because I think that's the second part of the cementing process, right? You think about it, then you structure your thoughts and you actually write it down. That completes the full feedback loop. And so I highly encourage everyone to when they're practicing problems, I think there's one in terms of practicing it in a mock interview environment, give yourself a time constraint, maybe don't make the problem last for more than 30 minutes before you kind of give up and try to tackle another problem or something like that. But definitely also commit towards writing down your thoughts. And so when you're doing a case question, you can think about it and you can be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's probably how I do it. But then when it actually goes into an actual interview and you have to speak to them and structure your thoughts in a way that's legible, you'll realize that your thoughts are going to come out in this nicely written kind of structured manner. And so by writing it down, you're committing to practicing it and really committing to understanding exactly how you would frame the problem in real life and do that whole brain to brain communication process, which is easiest through writing, in my opinion.
That's awesome. Well, I trust both of these guys related to the sort of the meta learning skill. As I'd mentioned, Jeff does that month to mastery thing. He's a big fan of the book Ultra Learning. And so, those are elements of, I wouldn't necessarily say specifically data science, but they are science that you can integrate into a learning process like this, which I think is fun. That's one of my passions as well, as understanding where is the intersection of the data science domain that we have and these other fields and how do we integrate them and have a lot of fun with them. I think I want to make sure we save some time for questions. So I want to just address one more question to both of you. I'll probably start with Jeff again, is that how do you approach landing a data science job earlier in your career versus later in your career? That's something we've talked quite a bit about. I know you have some data on that. To me, this is pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, so I would say, I actually have data on that and the different channels in which I got interviews earlier in my career and later in my career. So just to start off, earlier in my career, I had to do a lot more outreach on my own. So I had to do a lot more, cold emailing. I had to go reach out to friends to get referrals. I had to send more direct applications. And to tie to my earlier point, it's not saying don't send direct applications at all, but more of your effort should be focused on the higher ROI channels. So then looking at my own data, later in my career, I actually got a lot more inbound from recruiters. So with 4 or 5 years of experience, I actually don't need to apply as much. Recruiters will actually just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm going to get a much higher response rate. And actually later in my career, because I have experience, the direct applications will actually work a lot better. So I actually saw that the ROI for direct applications start to increase as I have more experience, because I'll actually immediately pass that resume glance test, versus when I have no experience, it's a little harder to pass that resume glance test. So I have to put more effort into differentiating myself, sending cold emails, and kind of sticking out from the crowd.
Awesome. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, definitely. I think earlier in the career, you definitely have to come out. You have to basically, you have to really go out there and push yourself towards finding a data science job and finding really anything that could fit within the realms of what you're willing to do, just to kind of get that first experience. I think later on in your career, definitely gets easier. I don't think I would ever apply to a job again personally. I would rather like kind of look within my internal network because when it comes to, later on in your career, you definitely get a lot pickier about what kind of job you want to do. You have a lot more flexibility. You have a wider skill set. And at the same time, you have to like think about it more in terms of opportunity costs, right? In terms of like, okay, if I do this thing, then that's not allowing me to like do something else, or like, do I want like a really harder work environment where I'm just heads down like 80 hours a week, or do I want something more relaxed, kind of like 30, 40 hours a week of work and can kind of enjoy my life? And so I definitely think, just kind of going back to the jobs hunt, a lot of it will be like, you're going to have worked with probably hundreds of people after like 5 years of working in the industry. And at that point, you're going to have like this huge kind of referral network. And I think that most people probably just look within the referral network to actually land their next job, because at that point, they know who's good to work with. They understand like who's like an A player on their team. And then they kind of go towards those people towards really finding like that next job or next opportunity, because they know that, it is actually pretty bad if you like find a job and then you don't like it after 6 months. Like, it's horrible. And so you definitely get a lot pickier, I think, going on later down the road as you're understanding what is going to continue to improve your own skill set.
I really like what both of you guys sort of touched around, and that's the idea of building like a presence or sort of a brand in the domain. And the better your brand, the more recognition you have, the more opportunities come to you, or the easier it is to connect with someone that might have an opportunity that you're interested in. Yesterday, it's very fresh in my mind, I did a talk on like quantifying your brand with data science. And to me, that's something that you can start with initially, just like sharing your work, putting your stuff out there. Even people who have not had data science jobs, students, they can start getting reached out to recruiters if they're producing good work and sharing it with the right communities and creating a name for themselves in that front. And so I think that that's something that it isn't just something you do to start getting a job. That pays dividends way further down the road, later in your career. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I doubt I'll ever stop doing my job. Like I'm kind of part of the company, but I get a lot of reach out for people that are interested in my skill set because I have such a presence online. And there are a lot of opportunities that weren't even on my radar that I'm like, wow, that might be the coolest job that I've ever heard of. Right? The idea is, we're also limited by our search capabilities. There are plenty of opportunities out there that we probably don't know exist that might be the best possible fit for a job for us. And we can outsource that to like algorithms and to recruiters to bring those to us at a certain point, if we have enough of a presence within our company, within our network, or on these social platforms. So I think that that's something that, again, from a data perspective, can invert the job search as well. And if you're thinking about how to grow that, as well as like how to reach out to companies and do those types of things, that is likely to pay incredible dividends for you down the road as well. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we start taking some questions?
No, let's take the questions.
Awesome. Before we do that, how can people find out more about you, reach you, connect with you, those types of things best? Is it on Twitter, on LinkedIn? What might those be?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Like if you guys are preparing for data science interviews, check out Interview Query. I also have a YouTube channel alongside, not as popular as Ken's. Yeah, where my alter ego, Data Science J. So where I put a lot of like data science interview tips. And so subscribe there, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah. For me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I need to make sure I got the URL right. You can find me on my personal website. I have jeffleechronicles.com. So jeffleechronicles.com. And then Lee is spelled L-I. And then LinkedIn is just Lee Jeffrey. So Lijeffrey is my URL. And also on Twitter, Jeff M as in Mary, L-I. And yeah, that's how you can find me.
Awesome. And Jeff's article, his blog post on where he talks about essentially many of the things that he talked about today, breaks down his job search quantitatively, is on his website, Jeff Lee Chronicles. So if you want more, if you want kind of the long version rather than the TLDR version, that's a great place to look for it. I've been reading through some of the questions, and if anyone has additional questions, please send them in. The ones we have so far are incredible ones, very in depth. That's why I wanted to make sure we had time to answer a couple of them. So the first question, guys, is in a time when so many people are highly qualified and have dozens of side projects, what have you found to be the best way to differentiate yourself and stand out among candidates outside from cold emailing specific recruiters?
Yeah, I can take this. Yeah, I mean, we can all take it, but yeah, Jay said it earlier, figuring out what the business problems are. So like most people will work on the same projects, like the Titanic Kaggle, the MNS IST data set. They'll build the same projects, and that's like the way to not stand out. I would say the best way to stand out is for the company that you care about, figure out what their biggest challenges are. You can do that through the informational interview. And then once you get their biggest challenges, then you can come up with ideas or projects or even build a project that addresses those specific business problems. And you actually can email it or present it to your interviewer. And then I think most candidates won't do this. And I think that's the best way to show that you can provide value for the company.
Yeah, Jeff, to that point, if you are narrowing your job search, right, you're being selective about specific industries or specific companies, that allows you to actually scale more with those individual projects, right? So if I do a project, let's say in agriculture, right, that's good for all of my agriculture companies that I'm applying to, right? So it's not just I'm doing this for this one-off company. If I'm actually being more selective, my projects with my own job search, my projects are going a longer way. And so it's just a different way to kind of squeeze this balloon in the equation. But I think that's really relevant. A lot of people will be like, oh, I'm not going to do a project for every company I'm applying to. But if you're smart about it, you can do like a couple projects. Let's say you have 4 projects and you're applying to jobs in 4 different industries. You can showcase different skills and specific skills for those industries in each one of those projects and go pretty far with it, frankly. Anything to add, Jay?
Yeah, I'd say definitely, like, to rehash that, like I'll talk about my own experience now hiring. So at Interview Career, we're actually hiring for a growth kind of analytics person. And the way I've seen candidates right now, I think if someone just emailed me, like as Jeff said, would just say like understanding of what the problems like our startup is facing, especially when it's within growth, they can understand that like, okay, I see you guys are, doing this in SEO. I see that you guys are probably like trying to grow the business and accelerate it by this. I have like a kind of strategy or experience that I've done previously that's really similar, or like I know exactly what your challenges are and why I might not have the solutions. At least I've pinpointed what the exact challenges are. And so like personally, I think like if you can even identify like what they're facing and what the problems are, you're already halfway there, because I think a lot of times like no one even thinks about that in terms of the business. They're just like, lay it on me. They're just like, give me any question you want, I'll answer it. But really, I kind of want like the candidate to come out and just go out there and actually like really figure out, what exactly is it that, I'm trying to hire for? What am I trying to take? What is this work that I'm doing right now that I want to like move on to someone else? And how can that other person take the initiative to figure out what those problems are and craft solutions around it? And so judgment is key here. Definitely super important. And also as a aside, if anyone is interested in growth analytics, please reach out to me after.
Yeah. Well, something that I think is really overlooked, everyone wants to compete on the things that everyone else is competing on, right? Like everyone wants to be the best Python programmer or like be the best at a specific skill set. But if you want to differentiate yourself, you should be celebrating your differences, right? I mean, honestly, the best thing I ever did for employability was to create a YouTube channel, right? That conveys and signals very strongly that I have good communication skills, that I can be put in front of clients, or that I can have that I can showcase a skill set that a lot of other data scientists aren't as excited about showcasing or putting forward. if you write really good blog posts, that's also a great way to differentiate yourself. Writing is one of the most important skills in any data science or technical domain now, right? Like, how do we communicate? Do we talk to people face to face anymore? Do I call Jeff up if I'm having during like a code review? No, like everything is done via Slack, which is a written medium. So if you can excel at some of these things that people aren't necessarily thinking about, like, you can differentiate yourself in a really positive way. Like, the way I look at it, coding technical skills, for the most part, they are like a strategic minimum, which means that if you reach the threshold, like, you're good. It's like a checked box. It's a binary thing. Like, some people, if you're like super, super great, they'll take note of it and they'll take you. But people are looking at the whole package rather than just the individual thing. Sorry, I think that's a very good question. Obviously, very excited jumping in on that one. Next question, guys. Anything to add on that, or we should be good there? Perfect. Could you walk through the various potential titles of data science careers: analyst, data engineer, data scientist, machine learning engineer, and how do we know what's the best fit for us? Either of you could take it. I think I have a full video on this as well on my channel. So SparkNotes probably will do on this front.
Yeah, I feel like there's not that much differentiation. I mean, definitely for analyst versus engineer, analysts definitely do more analyzing of data, and then engineers build more kind of infrastructure, the code and stuff. But, titles are also kind of like, they don't, like, people just put them out there, and it really depends on how much they know about the position themselves. And so, like, I remember at my last company, they're like, they used to be called data analysts, but then they changed everyone to data scientists because then they realized it'd help out with recruiting more. And so, to be honest, like, it really, you really have to dig down to understand, like, what exactly am I doing? And I think there are official kind of like titles that are attached to role responsibilities, and we've tried to map that out ourselves. But for each job, it could very much well be a marketing play in terms of like getting more applicants to the job versus also, paying people different amounts. Historically, analysts make less than engineers or scientists. And so I'd say that, figure out what you want to do, figure out, what your skill set is, and then really try to map that onto like the job posting. And I wouldn't really focus on titles that much.
Awesome. So I think SparkNotes, like, look at the postings, see if those skill sets are interesting to you, and approach it that way. The next one is, could you speak to data points that might be relevant for women and people from minoritized groups in securing a data science or tech position?
I don't have many data points. We don't collect a lot of data points for gender or race, but I would say that historically, I think I know that data science in general is probably a little bit more equal in terms of like the gender between men and women versus software engineering, which is, I think, really good. Yeah, I think it's definitely like something that we have no idea on our end. I have no data points.
I think something really relevant there is just looking and doing homework on the specific companies. I think that there are certainly some companies that are more progressive, that are looking for more thought and, in gender and race and all different types of equality. And I think that those are generally companies that are going to do well. Like, the more different perspectives you have, the more takes and the more, not necessarily conflicting opinions, but the more people can challenge conventional thought is really a good thing. And I don't, off the top of my head, know the specific companies, but there's a really good podcast that my friend Corinne Jean-François hosts. It's the Women in Data podcast. And they really focus on a lot of the different avenues, whether it's like advocating for yourself, asking for a raise, or approaching the field, which I think is a great place to start from like a more minoritized group or a different gender perspective. I think we probably have time for just one more. we're cutting it a little close on time, but we'll try and spark notes it. We're often told to customize our cover letters to the job. Do you have tips or job descriptions that are incredibly broad and vague or include too many qualifications so it's hard to figure out if it's a good fit?
Yeah, I have a good answer to this. So if you see a bunch of qualifications with a bunch of like PhD and machine learning experiment, no, I would just say like, if you fit, my rule of thumb is if I fit 50% of it, I just apply for it. And a lot of times they will actually reply. So I wouldn't, if you feel like you're like 20% of it, then yeah, maybe it might not be a good fit. So that's one heuristic that I use. If the description is very broad or vague, it doesn't tell you anything about the position, I would try to find somebody on LinkedIn who works in that position at that company, look at their description, get a feel for what they do, and just use that as the replacement for the job description. It's not going to be perfect, but that's another, tactic that you can use.
Awesome. I think that's all the time we have for questions. If there are additional ones, feel free to shoot them over to any of us. The best place for questions for me is just commenting on any of my videos. I respond to all of those there. Thank you everyone for the time. I at least had a lot of fun. I hope Jay and Jeff did as well. And I mean, it's nice to be virtually back on grounds for the first time in, I don't know, 3 or 4 years for me. So again, we really enjoyed it. Thank you to UVA for hosting this. And we hope that this created some value for everyone, especially when you approach the job hunt in a more quantitative way. Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.